Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're digging into something you might not expect, the really surprising origins of American life insurance.
Yeah, and specifically its connection to secret societies and their rituals. Back in the 19th and early 20th centuries, it's quite a story.
Absolutely. And you're here because you want to get the core insights, get smart quickly and thoroughly. That's what we do.
We've waded through the historical accounts, the analyses, all that stuff, to pull out the really key pieces for you.
Exactly. No fluff, just the important and, frankly, fascinating details.
So let's set the scene first. 19th century America, life was, well, precarious.
Right. High mortality rates, you had disease, accidents, the aftermath of the Civil War.
And not much of a safety net. Not like today. Plus, there was this real stigma around taking charity. People didn't want handouts.
So they needed another way, a way to protect their families if the worst happened.
And that's where these fraternal organizations step in big time.
Brotherhoods, sisterhoods, offering mutual support.
But it wasn't just a pat on the back, was it? No, it went much further. They built these community safety nets. And a huge part of that, surprisingly, was early life insurance.
Okay, but the methods. Some of them sound a bit, let's say, unusual now. Secret handshakes and ceremonies.
Which leads us to the core question, really. How did these seemingly secret or even occulted practices become so central to making life insurance work back then?
That's the mission for this deep dive, unpacking that connection. But let's be clear about occulted.
Right. Important point. We're not talking witches and wizards controlling insurance rates or anything.
No. Occulted here means hidden, secret, symbolic. The esoteric side of their rituals, the mystique.
Think hidden meanings and ceremonies, passwords, that kind of thing. Not supernatural influence on the industry itself.
It was about creating belonging, exclusivity, and how that meshed with providing financial security.
And, you know, Table 1 in the source material really highlights this. Before these guys, life insurance was mostly for the wealthy.
Yeah, commercial options were limited, expensive.
Fraternals made it accessible. And that secrecy, the ritual aspect, that was actually part of the appeal, part of how they democratized it.
Okay, so let's talk about that foundation, this idea of mutual aid. It wasn't invented in America, right?
No. It goes way back. Ancient burial societies, European-friendly societies. It's this basic idea of reciprocal help. We look out for each other.
But it really found fertile ground in the U.S., became a crucial support system, especially for groups who were often excluded elsewhere.
And then you get this key moment, 1868, the founding of the Ancient Order of United Workmen, the AOUW.
By John Jordan Upchurch. And interestingly, he was a Freemason.
That's a connection we'll come back to. Initially, the AOUW was maybe closer to a trade union, but it shifted.
Shifted towards this innovative life insurance program. And it's seen as a real pioneer.
Yeah, the first major national life insurance order, the first American lodge, set up specifically for fraternal life insurance.
And what they offered was pretty groundbreaking for the time, this death benefit.
Usually around $500 to $2,000 back then, which was a significant sum. Enough to cover debts, maybe keep a family afloat.
And how was it funded? Not like a modern insurance company.
No, it was based on assessments. Members paid in as needed to cover the benefits for those who passed away. It kept costs down, made it affordable.
And this model just exploded.
Pretty much. Huge success. Led directly to what historians call the golden age of fraternalism. Dozens, hundreds of similar groups spring up.
But it wasn't just about the payout, was it? There was this whole philosophy of fraternalism.
Exactly. It was about moral character, building community through the local lodge, democratic self-governance, social connection, fellowship.
The lodge system seems absolutely critical here.
It was the heart of it, the place for rituals, social gatherings, and importantly, keeping an eye on each other, ensuring everyone upheld their end of the bargain.
So the insurance wasn't just a product they sold. It grew out of this ideology.
Precisely. It was the practical application of their commitment to brotherhood, to shared responsibility.
Okay, back to Upchurch and the Freemasons. How deep did that influence run?
It was significant. Many fraternals borrowed heavily from Masonic structures, the lodge system itself, degrees of membership, rituals, secret grips, passwords, all that stuff.
So Freemasonry basically provided a ready-made template.
In many ways, yes. A replicable organizational model that helped these fraternal insurance orders spread incredibly quickly.
Okay, so they're built on brotherhood, mutual aid, but also veiled in mystery, bound by oaths. This secrecy wasn't just window dressing.
Not at all. It served very practical functions. The mystique, the allure of being an insider, made membership highly desirable. It fostered cohesion.
And the rituals themselves. More than just pageantry.
Definitely. There were tools for moral instruction, reinforcing those core values needed for the insurance to work: fraternity, self-reliance, thrift, loyalty, fidelity to your obligations.
Got any specific examples? How did a ritual teach thrift, for instance?
Well, take the Independent Order of St. Luke, an all-black society doing amazing work. Their initiation literally framed new members as joining the same family.
Wow, that's powerful.
They had symbolic journeys, like one to Jerusalem. Initiates wore a torn white robe, a symbol of humility, a reminder to rely on oneself and the community, not just on wealth. The whole thing emphasized oath-bound duty.
And other groups, like the women's orders.
Right, the ladies of the Maccabees, for example, all women. They drew inspiration from the Maccabees and the Old Testament protectors of home and family.
So the rituals reflected that.
Exactly. They promoted self-reliance, thriftiness, patriotism qualities seen as vital for women managing households and safeguarding their families' futures, which the insurance was meant to support.
So the rituals are reinforcing the very behaviors that make the insurance pool more stable.
Precisely. And beyond the moral lessons, these initiations, the lodge meetings, they built real emotional bonds. They were a huge source of social life before radio, before movies.
And the occulted bits, the symbolism, the mystery that added to the appeal.
Absolutely. Symbolic journeys, sometimes quite dramatic or even macabre pageantry, the promise of learning secrets. It was compelling stuff.
I read about the woodman groups. Axe twirling. That sounds pretty unique.
Oh, the woodmen of the world and the modern woodmen of America, they really embrace spectacle. Axe drills, parades.
And the tombstones, shaped like tree stumps.
Yes. A brilliant piece of branding, really. Often with the motto, dumb, tacit, clement, though silent, he speaks. Each log or ring could symbolize a dependent, maybe a child, a constant visual reminder of the protection the order provided.
It's incredibly memorable, tangible.
And their internal rituals could get intense, sometimes forcing recruits to confront mortality, maybe navigating a dark obstacle course, encountering a skeleton symbolically.
Okay, that's quite macabre.
But then they also had this other side. Pranks, slapstick humor.
Like riding the goat? What on earth was that?
Huh. Yeah, that was a classic initiation prank. Often involves some kind of mechanical bucking device or just being blindfolded and led around chaotically. It sounds silly.
That does sound a bit silly.
But it served a purpose. It was an icebreaker, created instant camaraderie through shared, slightly embarrassing experience, made people talk, laugh, bond, and it encouraged recruitment people wanted to see their friends go through it.
So the shared ordeal, even a fake one, built community.
Exactly. And then there was the allure of progressing through different degrees within the order. Each step promised deeper secrets, more mystical, esoteric knowledge.
Which kept people engaged.
Yeah.
And paying their dues.
Precisely. It ensured long-term commitment. So these rituals, they weren't just random traditions. They were sophisticated socio-financial tools, addressing social needs, psychological needs, moral grounding, and the financial need for insurance.
So the secret society element was actually core to the business model, a way to market life insurance.
Absolutely. It was a huge part of the value proposition. Think of it like early experiential marketing or symbolic branding. Way more engaging than just signing a policy with some faceless commercial company.
Okay, so the whole lodge experience.
Yeah.
The social life, the networking, the lessons, the fun that pulled people in. Not just the insurance payout.
Definitely. And that mystique, the secret knowledge belonging to this exclusive group, that fostered commitment. It made people want to pay their dues regularly.
Even the funny or startling initiations helped keep people involved and attract others.
Strange as it sounds, yes.
Yeah.
They created buzz, made the lodge seem exciting, different, a reason to join and stick around.
Right. Now, let's get more into the nuts and bolts, the money side. You mentioned assessmentism. Can you break that down?
Sure. It was fundamentally different from the legal reserve system the big commercial insurers use, where they build up large funds based on actuarial calculations.
Oh, wait.
Assessmentism was more pay as you go. When a member died, the society would levy an assessment, basically collect a small amount from every other member to pay the death benefit.
Sounds simpler, maybe cheaper up front.
It was. That was the appeal. Lower initial costs, but it was vulnerable. It absolutely depended on two things. A steady stream of new, younger members joining to keep the assessment pool large and the costs low per person, and everyone consistently paying up when called upon.
So growth was essential. What happened if membership aged or stalled?
Then the assessments per person would have to go up to cover the same number of deaths, potentially becoming unaffordable. It was a potential weak spot.
So how did they manage risk? beyond just hoping for growth.
They had some really interesting informal methods built into the whole fraternal structure.
Like what?
Well, membership wasn't automatic. You usually had to be sponsored, vetted. They looked for good moral character.
Why moral character? How does that relate to insurance risk?
The thinking was that people who were seen as industrious, thrifty, self-reliant, disciplined the values they promoted in rituals, were less likely to engage in risky behaviors, more likely to stay healthy, and more likely to pay their dues. It was a kind of character-based underwriting.
Interesting. Any other filters?
Yes. Many targeted specific groups expected to be lower risk, like the woodmen seeking young, healthy men, often in rural areas. Some even had basic physical fitness requirements.
And they could actually deny claims based on behavior.
They could, and sometimes did. Sickness benefits might be denied if the illness was linked to intemperance or immoral conduct, or if you hadn't disclosed a pre-existing condition when you joined.
Wow. That feels very different from today.
It was, and the lodge structure itself helped enforce this. Remember the visiting committees?
Right, checking up on sick members.
Exactly. They'd visit, see if the person was genuinely sick, following doctor's orders, not malingering. It was peer monitoring, basically. Help prevent fraud and what insurers call moral hazard.
So the community policed itself, in a way.
Precisely. It was this whole system built on social bonds and mutual accountability. A true private alternative to state protection, as one source put it.
And the benefits, when paid, were significant.
Absolutely. That $1,000 or $2,000 death benefit could pay off a mortgage, keep kids fed. Huge impact.
And they offered more than just death benefits.
Often, yes. Weekly sick benefits, maybe $5 or $10, which was vital wage replacement if you couldn't work. Some large orders even had lodge physicians, like an early HMO.
And beyond individual benefits.
Many got involved in wider philanthropy. Orphanages, homes for the elderly, even hospitals run by the larger orders. They were nonprofits, remember. Any surplus often went back into these community projects.
Table 2 in our sources gives a good snapshot of some key players. AOUW, Woodman, St. Luke, Ladies of the Maccabees. You see the variety.
You do. And looking at that table, you really see how the ritualistic, the secret parts, were tied to the insurance.
How so?
Being an insider, climbing the degrees, seeking that esoteric knowledge that kept people invested, literally, it kept the assessment money flowing, the fun, the camaraderie ensured participation.
And the moral lessons aimed for a lower risk pool.
Right, so those secret society elements weren't just fluff. They were integral to the economic engine and the risk management. Early innovators in their own way.
Even if some practices, like excluding certain groups, seem problematic now.
Yes, that's the paradox. From a modern view, some exclusions are troubling. But historically, that selectivity likely did help them manage risk effectively and keep costs low for their chosen members.
Okay, let's tackle the occulted question head on again. We've seen these practices within fraternals. But are we saying occult forces ran the whole early insurance show?
No, absolutely not. That's the critical distinction we need to keep making. We're talking about the hidden rituals, symbols, passwords, esoteric teachings inside these specific fraternal groups.
Designed to be mysterious, alluring.
Exactly, to enhance the value of belonging, giving members a sense of special knowledge of community.
But the mysteries themselves weren't like spills for profit.
No. Generally, they were moral stories, interpretations of symbols, legendary histories of the order, not supernatural business strategies.
Like the St. Luke order using biblical stories.
Right, for ethical teaching. The mystical, esoteric knowledge was usually about understanding the order's philosophy, the meaning behind the ceremonies.
So if someone listening is thinking about the more occulted ones and insurance history, where should they look?
The real story, the factually supported one, is about the function of these hidden, symbolic practices within the fraternals. That's where the connection lies.
The evidence shows these practices helped with recruitment, retention, reinforcing values useful for insurance, building their brand.
Yes. Secrecy and ritual were practical tools for building and running these mutual insurance groups.
And the broader commercial insurance industry developing at the same time. Different story.
Very different based on the evidence we have. No indication of widespread control by occult groups or reliance on esoteric rituals in the same way.
But maybe some overlaps. People involved in both worlds.
You might find tangential links, like Henry Steele Olcott worked in insurance before co-founding the Theosophical Society, but that doesn't mean Theosophy controlled insurance firms.
Or things like anthroposophic medicine and some health insurance.
Again, A specific limited example, not a broad pattern in the early life insurance industry we're focused on. Modern corporate logos using symbolism is more about branding today, not operational occultism back then.
And conspiracy theories about this stuff.
Generally lack specific, credible evidence relating to the early life insurance industry. The real influence is Freemasonry on the fraternals.
But that was more structural inspiration, not a unified occult agenda controlling insurance.
Exactly. Mimicry and adaptation of a working model. The best way to understand the occulted elements in this story is as clever tools for social organization and business building in that specific 19th century American context.
Tools to build loyalty, attract members, reinforce mutual aid.
Right, using mystery and secrecy pragmatically for tangible results. The later shift away from fraternals towards commercial dominance wasn't an occult takeover. It was about economics, regulation, social change.
So the occulted ones relevant here are the fraternal benefit societies themselves. They were secret societies providing insurance.
That's the most accurate picture.
Okay, let's move towards the end of that era. This golden age of fraternalism, 1890s to maybe the 1920s, early 30s. It didn't last forever.
No, it peaked then. Huge membership. Maybe a third of adult men belonged to some order. They were a dominant force in providing that safety net, life, sickness, accident insurance.
So what changed? Why did the lodges start to wane and modern insurance rise?
Several big factors converged. A major one was state regulation, starting in the early 1900s.
How did regulation hurt them? Wasn't it meant to protect people?
It aimed to by imposing solvency rules, requiring them to hold legal reserves like commercial companies. But that directly challenged the assessment model they relied on.
Made it harder for them to operate their way.
Much harder. The sources talk about a spectacular reversal for many fraternals once these regulations kicked in. It's a real irony. Standardizing protection weakened these effective community-based systems.
A classic case of unintended consequences, maybe?
You could argue that. Then the Great Depression hit hard. People lost jobs, couldn't afford premiums, membership plummeted.
And other options emerged.
Yes. Commercial group insurance offered through workplaces became more common. And crucially, government stepped in with Social Security in 1935. That filled a huge part of the need fraternals had addressed.
Society was changing too, right? Less reliance on the lodge for social life.
Exactly. Radio, movies, eventually TV, new forms of leisure competed with lodge nights. The unique appeal of the lodge started to fade for many.
Were there internal problems too?
In some cases, yes. Financial mismanagement, sticking to unsound assessment principles for too long. Not all orders were well run.
But some survived. We still have fraternal insurers today.
We do. The larger, more adaptable ones managed the transition. They reorganized financially, adopted legal reserves, think Woodman Life, Royal Arcanum, Independent Order of Foresters.
They keep the rituals in secrecy.
Often they had to shed the fraternal antics, as one historian put it, to become more like conventional insurers.
Yeah.
Some evolved into major financial services companies for specific groups like Thrivent Financial, largely without the old secret society trappings.
So despite the decline, their legacy is pretty significant.
Immense. They democratized financial protection for millions who were previously shut out. They educated the public about insurance concepts.
And many still focus on community benefit today.
Yes, that nonprofit, community-focused ethos persists in many modern fraternal insurers, scholarships, charity work, member support programs.
That tension you mentioned between community-based solutions and standardized regulation seems central to their story.
It really is. Those private alternatives built on social bonds just didn't fit neatly into the modern legal and actuarial boxes.
And it reflects a broader shift, maybe, a kind of secularization of insurance and entertainment.
That's a great way to put it. Fraternals offered this integrated package: security, social life, morality, fun, all bundled.
Then government and commercial insurance unbundle the financial protection part.
And commercial entertainment offered alternative leisure. The unique, all-in-one appeal of the lodge diminished. Insurance became more purely transactional, entertainment a separate commodity.
So wrapping this up, this deep dive really shows a deep intertwined relationship between early American life insurance and these fraternal secret societies.
Yeah, it's striking how central those occulted elements, the secrets, the rituals were to actually getting financial protection out to ordinary people back then.
Secrecy, ritual, symbols they function to recruit members, build loyalty, instill values, create a brand.
And all of it, ultimately, was tied back to the core job of getting people to pay premiums for mutual protection. It all served the insurance function.
But again, important to distinguish that from some broader occult conspiracy controlling commercial insurance. The evidence points to the fraternals.
Right. Their legacy is about making security accessible, pioneering community risk management.
It's a fascinating story of how people use community, and even mystery, to manage risk and care for each other. Really shaped modern financial security.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener. Thinking about this shift away from those community-based, ritual-rich, mutual aid systems towards the more impersonal, regulated insurance landscape we have now, what have we gained in terms of financial security? And perhaps, what might we have lost along the way?